Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Deconfine, South Asian Digital Arts Festival, which is under the aegis of Novembre Numérique 2020. I'm extremely excited and happy to present to you today, in my opinion, a phenomenal artist and a very humble person, Parvathi Nayar, who's with us today. Parvati is best known for her videos and complex drawing practices. She also engages with sculpture, painting, and photography. Her black and white graphic drawings are multifaceted works that look at the internal intimate spaces within our bodies, as well as the external public spaces in which we live, often through the prism of science and technology. Her works have been exhibited around the globe, including exhibitions like Kochi Museums Biennale, the Singapore Art Museum, CP Biennale in Jakarta, galleries Françoise Levinec, India Art Fair, etc. Parvati today will be in conversation with Mr. Bruno Plasse, Director of Alliance Française de Madras, and together they will explore Parvati's artistic practice, her previous works, as well as the series of works called Water Exchanges, which has been made for this digital festival. If you haven't explored the three-part video series, I request you to visit deconfine.org right away. Um, Thank you, Parvati and Bruno, for joining us. Over to you, Bruno, for this really excited, I'm extremely excited for the discussion ahead. Um, Pleased to have you.
Thank you so much, Khayal. So it's very nice, and I'm very happy that Chennai can be within this Deconfine project under the Novembre Numérique, and it's a real pleasure. So Parvathi Nayar is a Chennai-based artist, and she's a multifaceted personality. Since childhood, she has always been drawn to various art forms, especially the visual art. Her experience, as you mentioned, is very international. Since she spent many years abroad in Singapore, in London, where she did a master's degree, and also in Jakarta, Indonesia. So Parvati is as well a talented writer and poet, and she's a captivating orator, as you can see in following a TEDx speech on numerous interviews of her. Living as an artist is not always easy, and she had the opportunity to use her love for words and writing as a journalist and a critic, an art critic, and thus had the chance to meet great artists such as Frank Stella or Rem Koolhaas, from whom she was able to draw many inspiration. I had the chance myself, when I just joined Chennai 2 years back, to visit a very nice exhibition, Atlas of the Reimagining, at Gallery Veda. It consisted of a body of works showcasing the artist's multi-layered practice. Large size drawing, taking the visitors to an exploration of various scales of physical reality, of a personal atlas, mapping the reality of space, memory, topography, or of uncertainty. We were taken to an exploration of the macro and microcosm. Water formed the central motive of the project, scarcity and abundance, from the importance of a single tiny droplet to the possible devastation of a tsunami. Static drawings were already taking visitors in a move from a large scale to tiny details and to various mapping. In addition of that effect, animation, augmented reality, or additional layers of video on the drawing made the experience unforgettable, mixing chaos and order, motion and immobility, plenitude and scarcity. The inert surface becomes to life. The successive layers reveals themselves. The core appears and the experience becomes wonderful. Animated dots, spots, lines, and form change the perception. The fragile poppies are caught in the turmoil, but will survive better than the strong oaks. So maybe we can have a look at, so we've seen, I think, the most interesting, so some of the interesting parts of those exhibitions. And as a part of this project, there was a part called the Wave, which was inspired by the famous Japanese woodcut by Okusai from the 1306 views of Mount Fuji. And it was a very contributive project. It was made as a partnership with the Alliance Française Galerie Veda and Parvathi Nayar. We had some collectors of white and blue plastic containers, They were placed at the Alliance Française of Madras for our visitor to contribute to a gigantic wave of waste. Selected and displayed in the 3D, the waste is taking an essential message on the risk to be submerged by plastic. So maybe we can have a look to a short video on the wave. Great, thank you so much. So Parvathi, could you share with us some important work or essential project that have marked your career?
Thank you, Khayal, for allowing me to be part of your wonderful project, and Bruno for the generous introduction, and for setting my work in this very complex and multi-layered space. So to go back in time a little bit, I'm, sort of presenting work from a drawing installation called Drawing is a Verb. It was at the Arts House in Singapore. And the idea was to play with drawings in a specially created architectural space so that, people walked through different scales of work. There was also poetry sort of interwoven with the presentation, and came away with an experience of drawing rather than just sort of thinking of drawings as a product on the wall. So the idea was sort of, drawing is a process, every mark is shown, and it's a verb before it becomes a noun. And I think I've always wanted to show the arts in a different way. So drawing is perhaps the oldest art form known to man. The caveman who drew a line on the sand was, a draftsman. But he would not have been able to do the drawings that I do, which is sort of looking at the world through filters of perception, like, a microscope or a scanning tunneling electron microscope or images sent back by NASA. So even though it is the oldest art form, it's presented in a way that speaks of our time. Another, this is a work at the Jai Museum, which is one of the largest such works of, public works of art in a place at the Bombay International Terminal. And it's a story called, and it's a work called A Story of Flight, which is, over 20 feet high, spanning 3 floors. It is drawn sculpture. So what you see is not a print, but drawing, and drawing on multiple surfaces, which I think becomes clearer in this, where wood is the substratum, but every dot, every mark that's made is hand done. Again, creating a different space where you are not overwhelmed, but you are consumed by the world of the drawing, but it also lives in the air and the air that you breathe. Another one is the Kochi Biennale, which was an installation of drawings and sound over 5 rooms. And, you walked around these rooms and you had a different experience of the drawing. The one that you see at the back is, this very, very large scale drawing called the Astrolabe, where I look at, journeys of, the ancient seafarers over the seas to come to Kochi, to the shores of Kochi, using this instrument called the Astrolabe. But then I've blown this tiny instrument way out of size and intervened into its spaces to talk about journeys in water and the impulse, our essential human impulse to travel, ending with an image of Earthrise from the moon. And this was another work in that series called Salt and Pepper, which is, really just that, salt, a giant grain of salt hanging over the waters. And again, talking about the idea of how, collusions bring about knowledge, just as when the French culture, comes into contact with the Indian one, it creates a different and a new body of knowledge. I'm also part of an art collective called the Hashtag Collective, and this was an installation we did again in Kochi at a different time called, you know, talking about the intersection of crossroads and how a sense of self is fractured but perhaps recreated within the crossroads of new and old paradigms. So that's just a small collection of sort of previous work to give you a sense of what I do, which is sort of drawings and video and drawn sculpture and installations in exploring different themes, but water remains a very strong through thread through it. So thank you for that.
Wonderful, Parvati. So you had always wanted to be an artist, and we have just seen that your work covers drawings, painting, sculpture, photography, video. So how do you see yourself? More like a thinker, a doer, or a change maker?
I would always say it was really a major step to when I was young to sort of be able to say I'm an artist. It was something that you felt you had to own, rather than just say, anybody who paints is not an artist. So I don't think I take on the mantle or the conscious burden to be a change maker or someone who changes society. But I do think that society is made up of individuals, and I would like to think of the arts speaking to individuals. It's a dialogue, and where it lands and where there is a shift, and then the shape shifts a little. These little changes accumulate to perhaps causes tiny ripples of change to move outwards, in the sense of George Orwell, I remember wrote there were the four great motives for why he wrote, which was, sheer egoism, which is true. I mean, you really have to believe there you have something to say. And then, of course, the aesthetic pleasure, which is sometimes the aesthetic imperative, which is sometimes not given, I think, the importance that it should be given now, in the sense that when something attracts you, you do tend to go towards it and allow it to converse with you. It's a bit of a trick to draw you in some ways. And then, of course, there is the historical impulse and the political purpose. But I think these are sort of, for me, they are naturally interwoven into the things that I do in different degrees. And I think where it helps people or helps me to explore a full range of emotions, it helps me to be more self-aware of who I am and my role in the world. And I think, so for me, it changes me as a person. And then if it can come across and, make somebody else see the world that he or she thought they knew so well, just a little differently, I think that's as much as I aspire for, in a way.
Wonderful. So let's maybe focus a bit more now on the project Water Exchanges, which has been developed for this Deconfine festival. So water can be seen as a source of life, but at the same time, with climate changes, scarcity, floods, tsunami, how does water become an artist's topic?
I think a little bit in all those different ways that you've just listed, as in water has been a through thread in my work. Initially, it was just a question of mimesis. Water is so beautiful. You want to draw it. It's life-giving. It's what surrounds you. But then as you sort of work with it, you realize that water in itself, comes to the table as part of nature, as a stakeholder. And you want to give it that respect and that honor where it speaks for itself. And then you sort of go deeper and look at a whole body of work, which won't be presented here today, but involves around the invisibilities of water. So I work with diatoms, which are, these invisible, gorgeous silicon, creatures with silica shells, which look like something out of science fiction, which exist in water. But it's not just about what you don't see. There are also ways of talking about the purity of water. There are ways about talking about the nature and the content of water. So it's both the, the water as something that is part of us, part of our body. We need water to live. Even if we go to Mars, as I've done in a drawing, we're still going there and looking to see if we have water there. So it defines who we are as human beings, and we need to be very careful what we do with it in terms of not just a resource that we consume, but also as caregivers of a planet that we inhabit. We act as though we have many planets to visit. We don't. This is the only one that we have. So to deal with water in these complex and simple ways, I think, I draw water. I draw water, but then I also talk about water. And it's both the poetry of water as well as what it means for us as sort of stakeholders and as protectors, if you like, if that's not too idealistic, of the planet. We have it, and then we would like to pass it on, ideally not destroy it in our care.
Let's hope so. So the water exchange project consists of 3 videos of different nature. There is the channel of Reciprocity, interlinked system, and an ocean in every kitchen. So can you introduce the genesis of the project before we go for each and every phase of it?
Sure. I mean, in part, it was dialogues with you, Bruno, and with Khayal, whom I'd love to bring into the conversation, because we talked about what we could do with, I wanted to talk about water. I was quite clear that, it's what I wanted to talk about. And to talk about how could these concerns of mine be presented in a digital space that would talk about that digital space as well. So it was not, there are 3 videos. 2 are new. 1 is an extract from an older video. And we thought we would do a trio of movies or a trio of films that would talk about these different interests and engagements of mine in water, starting out with, water as a sort of holder of cultural impulse, as nature in its pure form, as just graphite drawings, that, I would work with Khayal, and we would come to a way of showing these that would not be possible otherwise. Earlier I talked about showing my drawings within an architectural space that was designed by an architect and forced the viewer. I say forced, but of course you always have a choice, but the viewer was led through a specific path and experienced those drawings in a way that you would not have if it was just hung on the wall. So for example, there was, I did these drawings of Europa that had been sent back by NASA, and on one end was a tiny corridor where there was the tiniest drawing of it. So the viewer had to walk physically close to see that drawing, but then when he turned around, he saw a huge drawing of the same on the other side. So he experienced, I hoped, she experienced in their bodies what it was to go within a drawing and then to be consumed by a drawing. So that was sort of drawing in an installation. But here Khayal and I were talking about how would you experience the sense of water and the sense of drawing as an art form in a digital space. And so the first part sort of grew out of these wonderful talks and exchanges that Khayal and I had. So then part 2 was to bring the human element very specifically into it. And it's probably the most political part of the trio of films. And then to round it out, we, again, with discussions with Khayal and so on, we, decided to extract a part of a film called An Ocean in Every Kitchen, which we felt would, round off these themes about how the personal really is the political. And, if ice melts in my kitchen, there is also a glacier melting in the world outside.
Maybe, Khayal, we can have a look at a part of a channel of Reciprocity so that we can have the video on the screen? So it's this first part, the channel of Reciprocity. It's an animation of a drawing made from materials, material work. The drawing to create an immaterial work, which is the video, video art evoking and exploring water in its movement. How was that experience to go from the material to the immaterial work?
It was actually very exciting because, you know, I feel the transition was very thoughtful. We've had the digital space with us for a while now, and it's sort of, you know, used in this sort of way of saying it's new media and therefore anything that comes on it is new and good. But we haven't really thought enough maybe about what is this space that is neither real nor actually virtual, because, you know, you see me, I see you. It's as tangible in some ways as the reality in which we live. And I think to think of a way that the drawings would be seen in this space that would not be seen in real life was the excitement. So to talk of a certain fluidity, a certain, you know, juxtaposition, you know, like, you know, Einstein's juxtaposition, so that they would convey a feeling about the aesthetics, the flow, the nature of water, and the also within that is this small sense of, you know, water disappearing and reappearing. So I think one of the governing principles that certainly sort of influenced me, and I think Khayal as well, was to show it in a way that could only be shown here in this space, that it could not be shown outside. And I think that was very exciting for me. I found that it was a very, very lovely process.
So we'll go to the second part of the body of works, which is called the interlink system, for which Khayal will display an abstract of the video.
The water lorry didn't come today.
Ganga, Brahmaputra, Indus, Mahanadi, Tapti, Godavari, Kaveri, and their many tributaries make up the river systems that give India its water.
When the water lorry system fails, we get no water. The building committee met today. They are rationing our water.
India's civilizations were built around rivers. Earliest maps in India, including the Udaygiri wall sculptures built under the Guptas in 400 CE, show the meeting of the Yamuna and the Ganga.
Our reservoir waters are at an all-time low. The monsoons have vanished again. Not a rainwater puddle in sight.
Can you, so this part is very political. So we had yesterday a discussion with our colleagues from Bangladesh. I was in Bangladesh before joining India. And the question of the water between the two countries is very political. What you have in this video is very, very political. So can you give us keys on why you do art? Is it a political issue or is it something else?
Are we going to see the video, or should I just?
I think we can go ahead.
Okay. No, in the sense that we we read in our papers or don't read in our papers about pollution, about water shortages. You hear about the disputes that have come, and you also read about how this is going to impact us in the future. And I think that people people still don't act. They don't act to change what is a problem now that can be changed, whether it's climate change or water as a resource or the polluting of the environment, because they think that, how do you say this? You think you can throw your trash on the other side of your wall and it doesn't affect you. But it does. It stays on the other side of the wall, and the poison leaches into the ground that you live on. So, so in that sense, I felt that, you know, we all live in buildings where, not we all, many of us live in buildings where, in Chennai especially, where we have to buy water, where we have regulated times for water, and you can see the irritation and the annoyance and the, just between you and your neighbor, between you and somebody else in the complex, about how much time do you get for water, who pays for the water, and these irritations mount up to, such sort of uh, um, large scale sort of wars within communities. And I think, when people look at this, don't they see that this is just the microcosm of a larger macrocosm, that these two are not unrelated? You're enacting with your neighbor or with the person down the street the same problems that the states are interacting with each other, that countries are interacting with each other. And but again, as we spoke earlier about the change of the individual is not powerless. You can stop certain things at your level, which may not change the world instantly, but could have a knock-on effect, could have a ripple effect. And sometimes you do feel extraordinarily powerful. What difference do I make? But I think it is important to remember that, you as an individual can make, it's maybe a drop in the ocean, but it is a drop. So that's where this sort of work came from. And it had been in my mind for a long time. And, thanks to Deconfine, it was just, perfect time to realize the work. So many thanks to Khayal and to yourself, Bruno, for, also allowing me to come and make the film at the Allianz, and to give me that space to make it in both literal and, conceptual ways.
You are always welcome, definitely. So we go to the third part of the project, which is an ocean in every kitchen. So maybe Khayal, we can display a part of this video so that our viewers can understand what we are talking about. So looking at the ballet of ice and steam in this third part of the project, we all see the fascination of climate change on our planet. So some people are highly sensitive, when others deny science and reality on that issue. So you already answered partially on that questions, but what, as an artist, is your vision on people denying the reality and the scientific facts?
To sort of to answer your question, but to move a little bit away from the video, the reason that I use science so much in my work, in terms of drawing these images that come from, particle colliders or from, images sent back by spaceships, a part of it is the wonderment. I do feel wonderment, and I feel, art should spark that sense of wonderment in you. But it's also because I believe the scientific language is so important in our day-to-day life. It's and that when you turn to science, it's not a rejection of beauty and art and wonderment and the softer elements of what make up um, uh, our day-to-day life. And I think, sometimes it's hard to make people understand that it's while science provides the images, it's my subject, in the sense of I would like people to think that it's another way of looking at the world. It's a way of describing the world that is equally relevant and beautiful. And when you look at the language of science as something which will enable us to live better, I think that's important, that that marriage of science and art and poetry and philosophy and science and art, these are not, especially in our world where convergence is, the paradigm shifter, if you like. These things need to come together in ways that speak not just to my peers. I do want to speak to my peers because those are the people who will understand, but also, the person who thinks, oh my God, science, I left it behind in school for a good reason, or the person who says, I'm scared to enter an art gallery because I don't understand what's going to be there. So to kind of bring these threads together, I think, is very important. And a part of that is what sort of maybe gives life to an ocean in every kitchen, because it literally started with me noticing, hey, the ice cube on my kitchen counter sort of slits and slides, and then I stood watching it and noticed how it melted down, and I thought, that's just the ice melting in my kitchen. But surely it behoves me to be aware that there are ice, glaciers melting, water levels rising, climate changing. And so I filmed it entirely by myself with with putting ice and filming it, and just playing with it, so that there is also, as you say, it is an aesthetic ballet of ice and steam. And but then there also, I hope people are drawn in, and then they sort of start thinking further away from what they see to what else it could be. It is itself, but it is at some level also maybe a metaphor in the nicest sense of the word.
Thank you so much for those explanations. So we have been deprived of, with the lockdown, of visiting gallery, on meeting artists in real, and on attending. So being deprived of attending live performance shrinks our life and deprive us from the richness, the rich relationships, human relationships that we have with others. Does it give this situation an heavier responsibility to the artist?
Yes, it's something that I'm still grappling with, because I've always believed in the aura of the artwork, in people needing to see the art, to experience its space, to experience what it's trying to tell you. And of course, that's really not possible now. And I mean, without meaning to be depressed, you wonder when that will be possible. So I think, exhibitions like Deconfine, which seek to present the work in a way that is truthful to the medium, is one of the responses. I find myself, for example, writing a lot more. I was part of a very interesting poetry and art online presentation. So, instead of writing poetry, the poetry was also combined with images, where the image and the poem was very closely linked, which you normally wouldn't find in a book of poetry. So the response was very much to the times, but the mode of presentation, the form of realization also came from the time. There is another project which was supposed to be a performance within an installation, which obviously can't happen. But we're thinking, why not convert that into a process of storytelling with imagery online? So we are trying to be, I think artists everywhere are trying to be thoughtful, whether they're standing on balconies and giving concerts or trying to do things online. I think we have to be wary that we don't think that showing a drawing online replaces the necessity to see it on live. It doesn't. That pleasure, that power can never be taken away. So I think what we are trying to do is to find other ways of talking about it through talks like this, through other ways of presenting. But at some stage, certainly with works of art that are concrete, I think you do have to go back to seeing them in some sort of space at some sort of time. But this is a creative time to think of, when sometimes when you see the blank canvas, what on earth do you do? But when you're told that you can only draw on half the canvas, what do you do becomes interesting. And I think we're all trying to respond to that half canvas and tell you, no, that is a full canvas on its own in a different way.
So in French language, we have a proverb that is à toutes choses malheur est bon, that could be translated into good things can come from bad. And it has the meaning of every cloud has a silver lining. In your personal experience, can you find any positive effect of the lockdown on your art?
I think the exploration of digital in a more thoughtful way, as opposed to, oh my God, what, it's there and only these sort of, people who are dealing with very, very sophisticated means can talk to the digital platform. Because in India, in Chennai, I mean, let's be honest, resources are limited. There is, the resources, the money that you have definitely shape the art. It's a reality. We don't have the resources, the grants, the philanthropists who would give money to make very, very complex, large-scale art. So what do you do with what you have? How can you use what you have creatively? And I think, to explore the digital with a little more assurance is one aspect, whether it is through, video or animation, or indeed through writing particular kinds of poetry or telling stories. That has been a positive result. And I think sort of there is a certain sense of looking inwards, which is always there. I think sort of aspects of it are magnified, whether, I would hesitate to have instantaneous reactions. These are still navigated, curated explorations that we're doing. And I think the results of this will also, I think, influence what I do over the next many years. If you told me last year at this time that we were going to be living our lives like this, I would have thought, no, there's no way it would happen. And there are so many, there was this massive installation in Singapore that was to have happened, and a work in South Korea. And, so there have been so many disappointments. And sometimes you sort of think, why couldn't it have happened some other year? 2020 was supposed to have been a really exciting year for me. So it hasn't turned out the way I had hoped it would, but it's also offered, opportunities that I never thought I would have. So it's been interesting. I would, I don't mean this in that the Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times, but more that it has genuinely been interesting to see how we respond and how, the human spirit of ingenuity still comes to the forefront to find ways of making sense of our time.
Yeah, but so at the same time, those technologies which can become a solution on the ongoing need of confinement, isn't it at the same time a risk of trapping us into virtual worlds?
It's always there, right? I mean, I love science fiction. I read science fiction. I watch science fiction movies with great interest. So, I'm all for the doomsday scenario that's going to come. But I think you risk a lot by avoiding looking at it totally. It is here, it is going to stay. So what are we going to do with it? I think for example, I see sort of very kind of practical uh, good things coming from it, where so many people have had to work at home instead of flying, 7 cities in 3 days, and you know the world hasn't come to an end because they've done that. So I whether we as human beings will be thoughtful, whether we will learn something from it, I don't know. There are times when I despair of the human race, and I know that's horrible. But there are other times when I think, surely we realize that, that slow fashion is fine, that we don't need to consume as much as we thought we did, and we can still, have very fulfilling lives. I Which is not to say I want the lockdown to last. It sort of, really is so restricted, especially for children to do online learning. But, it's, there are things that we can learn from it, that we can live simpler lives. And there are things that can be done online. This conversation, which has the three of us in three different places, could as well, have been if you had been in France, Bruno, and Khayal was still in Denmark and me in Chennai. It would, we could still have had this conversation, and it would have been meaningful. But what the lockdown doesn't permit me is to travel to France and to experience, the art in a contemporary gallery or in the Louvre, which is different from seeing that online. So I think these conversations are good, but the experience of art, depending on the kind of art we're talking about, those things are curtailed by the lockdown, and I can't wait for that to change.
Okay. So thank you, Parvati, and so Khayal. I think we came to the end of this conversation. So it was very nice to enter a bit the wonderful world of Parvati, and it was very generous of her to share with us a view on her work and as well on the world. So thank you so much, Parvati, and definitely I'm looking forward to visit an exhibition in Rio, maybe with you, as I did before. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Bruno, for for your thoughtfulness, and for the generosity of what you've shared. And thank you, Khayal. Really, Khayal, it was just really a lovely, lovely experience to be part of it. To work with you, to interact with you was just great. And I encourage everybody to go and see not just my work, but all the work at Deconfine.
Thank you, Parvati, for your words. Thank you, Bruno, for your participation and all your help that you brought to this project. I mean, responding to one question that you asked to Parvati about what good comes out of bad, I would definitely like to highlight here that I'm so happy in a way that all of this happened, because if this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have done, like, we wouldn't have done this festival, and I wouldn't have met Parvati, and we wouldn't have worked together. So I'm extremely happy for that. But thank you very much for this lovely conversation. Actually, I think it touched upon a lot of important points that we currently all of us are facing in this pandemic, and it gives like a lot of fodder for people to think and respond to. Again, I invite you to the website and to check out Parvati's works, including others. And I wish you a lovely day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.